Hello and welcome to The Diverse Bookshelf with me, Samia Aziz. On this show, I interview incredible authors doing a deep dive into important themes and issues while talking all things books. I'm really honoured to be hosting the incredible Abi Daré on the show today. Abi Daré is the author of The Girl with the Louding Voice, which was a New York Times bestseller, a Read with Jenna Today Show book club pick, and an Indie Next pick. She grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and went on to study law at the University of Wolverhampton and has an MSc in International Project Management from Glasgow Caledonian University, as well as an MA in Creative Writing at Birkbeck, University of London. Abi lives in the UK with her husband and two daughters who inspired her to write her debut novel. The Girl with the Louding Voice is an inspiring story of a teenage girl called Aduni who was growing up in a rural Nigerian village. Instead of going to school and playing with her friends, Aduni is actually a domestic worker working for a family in Lagos. She longs to get an education so that she can find her louding voice and speak up for herself. This is a tale about the power of fighting for your dreams. And despite the seemingly insurmountable obstacles in her path, Aduni never loses sight of her goal of escaping the life of poverty that she was born into, so she can build the future that she chooses for herself and help other girls like her to do the same. Aduni shows us how one courageous young girl can inspire us all to reach for our dreams and maybe even change the world. In this novel, Abi Daré writes about child labour, child marriage, infertility, status of women, and the power of education. I'm so pleased she's my guest today. Hi, Abi. Thank you so much for joining me on the Diverse Bookshelf today. I am so thrilled to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So to start with, I want to know where the idea for the story of the girl with the louding voice came from. What inspired you to write the book and how did you develop the character of Aduni?
So the book was inspired by my childhood growing up in Lagos, where it was very common for families to have housemaids, so often young girls working. I think the character for Aduni really was my own way of trying to hear the voices, the story, the real story behind the lives that these girls have lived. It wasn't a way to put any one of them in a box, but it was what I imagined their lives would be like. And also to kind of put a human touch and a human story behind many of the girls. And I say that because the maids that I knew that we had and families around us had tended to be seen or treated as objects. So they would come in as if they had no background, no history, no desires or hopes or dreams, and come to work and then they're gone. So they'll be with us or with whoever family sort of 6 months and then move on to something else. So you never really, there was hardly ever any chance to bond or to know these girls. Of course, there were people that had housemates for 10 years. And, I know people like that, but it wasn't the norm. It wasn't the common thing. And so I think that was kind of why I wrote the story, really for myself more than for anybody else.
And I think it's such an important theme that you are writing about, which is this sort of informal domestic labor, which doesn't just happen in Nigeria where the book is set, but in many places around the world. It is one of the most sort of worrying forms of labor that exist, because the fact that it is sort of underpaid and people are undervalued, and there's been cases around the world where like girls have disappeared or like faced huge issues when it comes to being abused or being locked up or sold on, and it's really, 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 really sad and quite worrying actually. And so you said that the book was inspired by your own sort of childhood and growing up and what you experienced in terms of people having these domestic workers. Now, I always find it really interesting because I think when we look at something when we're adult, we have, we're able to have an opinion and we're able to understand it from like a moral standpoint, and especially if it's something that happened in the past. But what was it like for you growing up around that? Like as a child, do you remember like how you felt, or were you surprised by anything that you were witnessing with regards to these girls that were working in homes?
No, I don't think so. I think that when you're born into a certain culture and a norm, you accept it as it is. You might have some questions, but surprise is not what you feel. You don't feel
Mm.
surprised, you don't feel shocked. You just wonder, okay, why? So I used to wonder, why am I going to school
Mm.
and this girl is at home,
Mm.
or why is, this girl sort of not very well treated, not in my house, but in houses around me. Maybe the odd shock and surprise at a very, very bad sort of
Mm.
treatment. But it was the norm and everybody did it. And even till now, it still is the norm. It's still very accepted. I think what is changing is the fact that the world is a global village now, and people are realizing and recognizing that the fact that something is a norm doesn't mean that you have to accept it,
Mm.
or that you can't change aspects of it
Mm.
to make lives better for
Mm.
everybody else. So I always say when I'm talking about this that I don't have an issue with labor. What I
Mm.
have an issue with is child labor,
Yeah.
is the ill treatment of maids or houseboys or house girls by families. It's the injustice meted out to these people
Mm.
that bothers me, and that needs to have a law around, and that needs to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And it's actually really interesting to think about how we just accept things that everybody
Mm.
around us is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess because I'm looking at it anyway, and I guess to some extent now that you're an adult as well, we look at it from the outside and we come with our own set of values and our own set of experiences, and we try and impose that on
Mm.
something else. And it's not a fair way of doing things, because actually, we need an understanding that things are more nuanced and complicated. And these are
Mm.
systems of power and systems of society that have been around for centuries. So yeah, that's really interesting. And absolutely, I think obviously the focus of the book is on child labor. It's on a girl that is desperate to break free of the chains that she finds herself in, and she wants to pursue an education. And I love that
Mm.
focus of the book. Like, I thought it was so important. And I work in the charity sector as well, and this is one of the things
Mm.
that I'm really interested in. And I think there's something like 140 billion girls that are not in school due to poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And what we see then is a lot of them are either begging, or they're
Mm.
involved in some sort of crime, or they
Mm-hmm.
are doing work in people's homes like Aduni is, and actually
Mm-hmm.
they should be in school.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to get your thoughts on education and why you decided to write a book that was promoting education in such a great way.
Thanks for that question. I think that we often, and when I say we, I mean we that are privileged, that have access to education, to in many parts of the Western world, free education.
Hmm.
We often forget how much of a privilege it is, and how it makes a major difference in your life and the choices you make and the decisions that you make for yourself and for your family.
Hmm.
I think that looking at the statistics, like you said, and understanding that particularly girls are at a huge disadvantage, and they suffer disproportionately when it comes to being taken out of school, because they're seen as domesticated and seen as objects or entities that belong in the kitchen, and should become, should get married and do everything their husband tells them or what their father tells them. And while all these things have a place in society, I believe that an education allows a girl to make informed choices
Hmm.
when, and I mean both girls and boys, but I'm talking about the girl child now, allows her to make informed choices when that time comes to decide what she wants to become for herself, and also to not be ignorant and not be cheated, and to be able to leave a legacy, and to empower her nation, and to contribute towards wealth of the society. So that the advantages are sort of innumerable, but I realize that not a lot of people appreciate that, because we have access to it and we see it as
Hmm.
it's just there. I don't want to go to school, I'm not bothered about it. But if we take this away, what we have is a deficit society.
Hmm.
And so I see it as a fundamental right, a fundamental human right. Is like, to me, it's like a right to life,
Hmm.
because it gives life. And then what you always say to my daughters, I say, what you decide to do after the first sort of 12 to 16 years, I would say, the first sort of 16 years, getting education, what you decide to do after that is shaped by those first 16 years of your life. right? It decides where you go, what you become, who you become. And so when people say to me and give examples of people that dropped out of school, it still made it, I say to them, they're one in a billion.
It's
Right?
yeah,
When
it's
you're
true.
quoting Mark Zuckerberg and all that, I say, well, they had a choice, right? They got into Harvard, so they had that education. They then decided not to pursue that to be able to build something else. You can't compare a young girl born in rural Africa or rural Asia and say to them they could go off and invent something and become great. The chances are
Exactly.
ridiculously slim. They can't even communicate, let alone invent something great. So yeah, so that's why I'd advocate for it. And also because I think that the world still needs to do something about these 136 million girls that are out of school today. The world needs to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with everything that you just said. I often think of education as being like the key thing that is going to help break cycles of poverty, because when you
Absolutely.
educate, you inspire, but you give fundamental skills that are going to make the world of difference when it comes to these people accessing the job market. And then in terms of like the
Absolutely.
decisions they make when they raise their own children and the next generations, like it's not just about one person's life, like we're talking about the entire, future generations to come. Absolutely love it. And the title of the book is called The Girl with the Louding Voice. Now, when I first picked it up, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what does that mean? Like, and I guess your assumption is like, oh, maybe it means a voice that's loud or a voice that gets louder. But I think as the book kind of develops and we hear Aduni, and she actually coins this phrase, she coins the word. And to me, I feel like there's a difference between something being loud and something being louding. Now, just because something is loud doesn't mean that it's going to be heard, and doesn't mean it's going to be taken seriously or anything is going to change as a result of it. And louding is like, no, something that makes people listen and something that's impactful and facilitates change and where somebody is really heard. Now, I mean, that's my view after reading the book. But why did you decide to go with that title, and what was your thinking behind that?
So thank you for that. And I really love your thoughts, and I love hearing from different people what louding means to them. And I've heard so many wonderful, wonderful things. But I think Aduni, in this case, is a deliberate choice. So she could have said, I want a loud voice, because her mother said, I want you to have a loud voice. So it's not like she didn't understand the English that she was trying to say there. This was deliberate. And she coined that word, like you said, because for her, a louding voice is about not just thinking about yourself. It's about leaving a legacy and changing lives beyond the now. It's about, because she understands that getting an education is a lifelong thing. So I've talked about the foundation years, but even beyond that, I'm still getting an education. By speaking to you, I'm getting educated. So it's a lifelong thing. It's something that needs to continue to happen. And for that to continue to happen, she needs to ensure that the people coming behind her, the girls in her village, also have a chance at that. So she says in a part of the book, she says, I want to walk into a room and I want my voice to be heard without me even saying a word. That's what louding means. It means all of who you are as a person, what makes you unique, standing out and becoming something great, but also helping the people behind you. And then all of what you said as well, it's being heard, is using her voice, her education to ensure that she's able to contribute to policies, effect change, address world leaders, do all the great things that no one expects a girl like her to do.
Yeah. And Aduni is one of the most empathetic characters, I think, that has been written. Like, she's so incredibly sweet and going through such turmoil, but you really feel it, like when she hears of things that other girls are going through, or there's a character in the book that has a lot of trauma. We're not going to give away too much, but the sort of the pain that Aduni feels when she's witnessing all these hardships, like, it really comes through the pages of the book. Honestly, like, such a beautiful character, and really kind of she wants all girls and all women to be safe and to be thriving and to be happy. And we talked about the fact that she coins this word, and part of that is throughout the book. Well, the whole book is written in this I guess it's called non-standard English. So it's not English as we know it, and it's not really like any other form of English. I found it really interesting because not only was it like broken English or showing somebody that didn't have a full grasp of English, or like English with a Nigerian accent. It wasn't even that. It was somebody, it was it was Aduni's own language in many ways, because she was taking words that she knew in English and she knew the definition, and she wanted to say something that was not quite that word. And so she would kind of make it up as what made sense to her, which makes complete sense, because in English, like, we have random words for things that don't even make sense to be to be the thing, right? So I really liked it. But what was the thinking behind writing in this non-standard English, and what was the process like for you?
Yeah, thanks. I think that the non-standard English was a way of, I think it really came from trying to reflect or to sort of respect the way that some of the girls that were maids used to speak. Because of course they were not educated. They had to drop out of school or not even go to school to be able to serve families. And because English is the official language in Nigeria, they had to find a way to navigate the language that they were not afforded the chance to be able to learn how to construct properly. But I also found out that, they did this quite brilliantly by inventing words and all of that. So of course, when I came to writing Aduni, I wanted to give her that agency, that respect to do that. But also because in Nigeria and also parts of the world, in the UK, where I came sort of 22 years ago now as a student, there is this reverence for your ability to speak very good English in a certain way. In Nigeria, people that don't speak very good English are automatically looked down upon. It's almost like we immediately see you as less than, as a second-class citizen, even within Nigeria. And in the UK, for me, I was always met with surprise and shock, especially back then as a Black woman. I'm in a store, I'm working. I remember one of my first jobs was working in a store, and I'm speaking English, and people are asking me, and instead of focusing on what I'm trying to sell, they're asking how come I can speak very good English and how come I sound so smart. And it just used to really irritate me and surprise me. And I realized this is a lack of education as well, is because you asking me how come I speak so well do not understand that I've come from a part of the world that speaking English is our official language. And two, that my ability to speak English has nothing to do with anything in my brain, right? So to speak is not a measure of intelligence, which Adini says. So I think it was just coming together and then using that character who doesn't speak very good English to then school and educate women like Big Madam who have children abroad and who can't make certain decisions for themselves. So it was kind of doing that. And how I achieved that was, trying to invent words, but also doing a literal translation of my mother tongue, which is Yoruba, into English, which you'll find that many people that speak dual languages or 3 or 4 languages, when you try to do a literal translation into English, it often sounds quite stilted, but you still get a sense of what the person is trying to say. And I do it even with my kids. Even before I wrote The Girl with the Louding Voice, I would say things to my kids and they'll start laughing and be like, Mom, you just said whatever. And I'm saying to them, look, sorry, I translated it to you in my mother tongue. And I just found it quite fascinating. And so that's where that came from.
It was really interesting, but I mean, more than interesting, like it was really fascinating, I think, because it gave us insight into Aduni's mind, and into her development as a character that we may have not like missed in other ways had it just been in standard English. Yeah, so it was really, really fascinating. And obviously the book, you write a lot about the status almost of women and their acceptance and validation in society and how they are dispensable and replaceable. And, like Aduni is essentially, she's sold, and we see, women experience all kinds of things throughout the book. And one of the things that you write about is fertility. It was actually a very difficult part of the book to read. It was really sad, quite traumatic. Why did you decide to include that element in the book, and what was behind that?
I think that sort of being a woman that has grown up both in Nigeria and the United Kingdom and being around the Nigerian community And I've spoken to hundreds of women from different parts of the world, and this is not a problem unique to Nigeria, right? Where the burden of fertility is almost 100% on the woman.
Yeah.
So you will find for those that go to church in churches, when they want to announce programs around fertility, it's the women stay behind after church. So you can pray to have a baby. And when you're looking at sort of traditional ways, for those that sort of do sacrifices or whatever it is, it's the women who do these things. So I was always wondering, it takes two people to make a baby for a family that wants one. Why is it always the woman that suffers it? Now, I have a friend who went through something very, very similar to what Tia went through, and she's educated and she's enlightened and she studied abroad and all of that, but she's still in the course of trying to get pregnant and doing all sorts of treatments and IVF and all of that, still had to sort of suffer in ways and she comes from a very educated family. But when it comes to things around fertility, I think all of these things are suspended, right? Education, all of that, and it's everyone looks at the woman because we all need someone to blame. Yeah. And a woman is easy to blame. And so she gave me that permission, and I really honor that and respect that, to tell her story through Tia. And so that's where that came from. And it's harrowing, but it's the truth. And it happens, and it's not a problem unique to Nigeria. I think different countries across the world have different beliefs and superstitions, and women would do whatever it takes often to try to deal with whatever it is they're facing. And because, of course, the issue of fertility, it often is a very open thing. Like you can't pretend that you have kids, unless you choose to sort of adopt, and it's nobody's business. But especially in Nigeria, you look at a family that's been married for 5, 6, 7 years, and everybody's asking questions. What am I saying 5 years? A year into the family getting married, everyone is asking questions, and everyone's looking at the woman. What are you waiting for? Without understanding whether she's been battling stuff, whether she doesn't even want kids.
Exactly.
Nobody cares. It's a business that is everyone's business, and it shouldn't be everybody's business. People should not be prescribing stuff to you because it's not their business. I just really wanted to talk about that and how the mother-in-law sort of waded into Tia's marriage and tried to impose her thoughts and beliefs on her, and she had no choice, even with all her education, but to comply.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a really great thing that you decided to include in the book and to write about, because I think it's not something that gets talked about nearly enough. And it's really difficult because I guess the one side of it is that where it stems from is this idea that for a woman to be validated or respected or to even feel like a successful woman, whatever that means, is to be a mother. But that's not everybody's journey and everybody's experience. Like some people can't have children, some people don't want to have children, and that's their choice. And some people want to have children later in life, or they want to have them early, and then they don't want to have any more after they've had 2 and whatever. Like that again, that's completely their choice. But society places this huge burden on women, and it's always on women. It's a couple will be married, as you said, but it will be the woman that's asked questions, and also then you're asked things like, is there something wrong? Have you been to a doctor? As if
or people start offering you stuff, ideas, and what worked for them, and you're thinking, what makes you think I'm interested in what work? I know it might be coming from a good place, but it's not your business.
Exactly.
And it's such a thing, even now. Exactly. It's such a thing, and I just wanted to talk about it because it bothers me.
Yeah, and also on that as well, I think just what's really interesting is in the book as well, like you show this kind of like this desperation that some women will do whatever it takes to get pregnant. And actually, and I haven't seen it so much in literature. Like I have, obviously, like Ayobami Adebayo writes about it really beautifully in Stay With Me, but it's not really there. And it's a really interesting phenomena because you're right in what you said. It's like all your education or your whatever will go out of the window because you're just like, oh, I'm going to go to this shrine in this remote location. I'm going to pray because I really, so and so went and
Mm-hmm.
they came back and they got pregnant, and so I'm going to go. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just really fascinating how that kind of the desire can lead people to do things that are not in line with their rational thinking or their education.
Mm-hmm.
And even Aduni, she comments to that effect
Mm-hmm.
in the book as well. She says, like,
Mm-hmm.
even education doesn't spare women from these
Mm-hmm.
kind of practices. And I just thought it was
Mm-hmm.
really fascinating and really interesting to do it in that thing, in the way that you did. So when it came to writing the book, what was your favorite part of writing the story?
Of course, it was Aduni and discovering her, and I would often laugh out loud when I think of something she would say,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't wait to get back to writing. I really loved writing that character, but I think also writing that scene with Tia, the
Mm.
scene we just talked about, I think that was one of the hardest, but also the favorite parts to write because I had to try and find a balance between being too gruesome and too explicit versus trying to get the point across and
Yeah.
making sure that I, first of all, was telling the story or painting the scene the way it should be painted without sort of watering down anything, but at the
Mm.
same time without being too explicit. So finding the right balance. But I
Yeah.
also really enjoyed writing Big Madam from Adoni's Eyes because that was
Oh,
just fun for me. I was just taking the piss with that, and I love to have that creative liberty to do that. I could only do that because it was Adoni looking at her that way. But in the eyes of any other character, it probably would not have been as much fun to
yeah,
write.
absolutely. And I think there are times in the book where you kind of forget that Aduni is a child because she's thinking about such big things and she's going through so much. You forget that she's a child. But the way that she describes Big Mama, you're like, oh, this is a child. Like this is this is very kind of like unfiltered, creative, innocent in many ways as well. So that was really
Mm-hmm.
nice. What do you hope readers will take away from your book?
Oh gosh, I think there's a lot of themes in the book. I
Mm.
mean, around being confident and using your voice and not letting society sort of talk you down. I mean, that's the whole of Adoni's story. She refuses to be silenced. And I've heard a lot of people say to me, I mean, who are not even from Adoni's background, who have various sort of abilities, and they're saying, I mean, I remember meeting somebody not so long ago who is autistic, and she's saying, look, Abby, I found, I was able to use my voice and think if Aduni is looked down upon and she still uses her voice, then I can do the same. So you hear all sorts of people, women, married, unmarried, saying all sorts of things and learning to find their voice and find that which they believe they need to get out into the world there to make the world a better place. But I do hope that of all of these wonderful things, I hope that the theme of kindness is a thread that was running through the story. And
Mm.
albeit it wasn't as obvious as everything else, as a fertility and all those other themes there, what
Mm.
you'd see from the start of the story is Adeni's mother's kindness paved the way for Iya's kindness, which
Mm.
paved the way for Adeni's kindness to Big Madam, which paved the way for Tia's kindness. So all through, women are sort of helping each other consciously or subconsciously. And all I'm trying to say is that a little bit of kindness can often go a very long way.
Yeah. Oh, that's so lovely. Honestly, that's so lovely. And yeah, I mean, kindness definitely does go through and throughout the book. And although Aduni experiences so much and the characters experience so much, she is always kind. And I think also
Mm,
believes that it will come back in some way as well.
mm.
Are you, obviously the Girl with the Louding Voice has been out for a few years now. Can we expect anything from you anytime soon? What are you working on at the moment? What's happening with your writing now?
Oh, Daja. I mean, it's been 2 years that feels like yesterday. I think we had the whole huge hole of the pandemic that sucked up the whole of 2020 when the book was released. And then 2021 was just a year of trying to adjust
Hmm.
away. So I think in 2022 was when I began to think, okay, what next?
Hmm.
I'm still exploring ideas and playing with different things and seeing what would stick.
Hmm.
So it's a bit too early to sort of tell or share, but I'm hoping that, maybe something exciting will take me back to Ikati and see if we can explore something else. That's Aduni's village or maybe not, we'll see.
Well, brilliant. Honestly, it has been so lovely to speak to you today. Thank you so much for your time. I wish we could carry on, but we must finish. And I will keep an eye out eagerly for anything else you produce. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much to Abi for such an insightful and wonderful conversation. I really hope you enjoyed every moment. If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow the Diverse Bookshelf on your podcast platform of choice and connect with me on social media. I'd really appreciate it if you could rate and leave a review, as it helps more people find the podcast.